products and some don't. So there's a trading mechanism in that directive for all the countries of the Union to participate in. So even though the overall is 20%, some countries are more and some countries are less. And that was resolved by the European Union. And at the same time, they don't include atomic energy as a renewable fuel. It's kind of a neutral. It kind of provides for expansion because it doesn't produce carbon dioxide, but they don't count it as a renewable energy. Because for sure, Europe uses more atomic energy than we do, at least France does, and they will continue to increase it. But they don't count it in this directive as a renewable source. So you have to find, but because it doesn't emit anything, it counts for expansion of their economy. But if they don't count it as it's too politically hot of an issue in Europe, just like here, to count it. But they don't discount it either. They know that it's going to happen. Anyway, that's an interesting directive. And if people are interested in what Europe is doing, we can learn a lot from in this area.
So it is legislated, and
yeah,
and efficiency is legislated.
Absolutely.
And that probably is the easiest approach to reducing carbon emissions is increased efficiency. But I hate to be cynical. I just don't see that our legislators passing such laws, even though
they have. Here at the campus, the Board of Regents have approved intercollegiate competition.
Oh, absolutely.
Intercollegiate
Statewide?
competition.
Statewide?
Well, yeah, there are several hundreds actually of colleges that participate.
No. For the state, for the population.
That's different. That's not really here.
Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's easy to get cynical about that. I think that's fantastic. 20% is a great goal.
It is a goal. It's not as good as some countries. And actually, after the Copenhagen conference, the European Union said, well, if we can get other people to commit, we might try to go between 20 and 30. And they were prepared to go to 30 before the conference if some agreement could have come out of the conference, including China and the United States and the other big emitters.
Sure, a lot of big colleges are involved.
They didn't get their wish in that regard, but it was, in a lot of ways, they are much further advanced in addressing the problem than North America is. Because Canada is just as bad as the U.S.
Who else wants to say something? I'm trying to keep us back. You?
Well, I just have a question.
In the union. Yes.
Not really about, not only a little bit about this, Brian. Just a comment on, I'm pretty neutral, frankly, on the nuclear controversy. But what strikes me is, it's not the people in this room you have to convince, it's our politicians. That's the real problem in this country. That is convincing the politicians, and if we can figure out a way to do that, then looks like we have a few supporters. That's the biggest problem. But I have a question first. Can you just spend a minute or two demystifying or demythologizing carbon sequestration from from how good it is and how much it costs?
Well, it's not uniformly popular because it's really expensive. It will rack up. That's probably first and foremost is the economy, and the economic aspects, because the minimum increase of the cost of electricity to consumers, and that's who will pay for it, would be about 50 to 60% at today's prices. The other issue that comes into play is the risk assessment. The risks are non-zero. It's anytime you inject a fluid into the ground, you're going to increase pressure, change the state of stress. You're going to change the chemical of the groundwater. You can induce earthquakes, and we've actually we're running 3 different carbon storage tests right now, and we've induced over 2,000 earthquakes. Now, of course, they are very small earthquakes, not detectable at the surface except by highly sensitive geophones. And the oil industry has developed billions of dollars worth of technology for controlling that seismicity and keeping it at the micro level. But the petroleum industry is extracting, how many, tens of thousands of barrels a day from a given oil field and injecting maybe that double or 5 times that amount of water for water disposal. CO2, on the other hand, you're talking millions of tons, orders of magnitude more fluid. So it has to be distributed equally. If you try to do it at one site, then the risks are not, they're non-zero regardless, but they're very non-zero if you start to localize it. But the different efforts that our research project and other research projects are examining, and we are just evaluating. And I straddle the line between sounding like a shill for the coal industry and sounding like a shill for the risk assessment folks, because I'm very much deep into the science of it. But it's my own opinion after 10 years, starting off with thinking it's a silly idea, is that it's certainly possible, but you can only go to very specific places to do this right, to do it properly, to minimize, to make the risks effectively non-zero. You can only, or close to non-zero, or close to zero rather. It's a very limited approach, and so I don't think it's the end-all solution. I think it's a very short-term, it's something we can do right now today, as opposed to a nuclear power plant, which takes 20 years to permit, much less build it. So it's, to get back to your question, it's, the issues are the efficiency of it, because it takes power, and the lack of, the amount of lack of efficiency leads to higher electricity costs, and then that you need to find places to put it where porous sandstones that contain saline water that's not going to be used for anything else are deep enough that they pose the least amount of risk. And you have to distribute it over a number of wells so that you're distributing that pressure induction. And one of Professor Ehrbar's questions was the chemistry of it. Well, those issues are long-term, century timescale issues really when it comes down to it in terms of affecting the creating new minerals. But you do create carbonic acid. You turn that brine, which is effectively too caustic to be used for anything at the surface, into acidic caustic brine. So it's but it's easier right now to get a permit for injecting battery acid than it is to inject CO2 at this stage. That's the reality of it. So it's not going to happen quickly, but it can happen technologically more quickly than a nuclear power plant, and certainly much more quickly. Well, I don't know. The ideas that were presented by my fellow panelists are probably on the same time scale of new power plants.
So I have a question about this, because in the movie on Thursday, I thought BBC was saying that many power plants were sitting right on top of sandstone formations. All they had to do is drill down to get that stuff done. Yeah. And now you're saying that geological formations where it's safe to deposit that are rare. So isn't that a contradiction?
No, in the western U.S., it's more often than not, most of the power plants are on sites where you can inject, drill right away, go right into wherever you want to, underneath the power plant.
And then cause an earthquake.
Pardon me?
And then cause an earthquake.
Not if you distribute, I mean, you have to distribute.
I was being a little bit.
Yeah, tongue in cheek, yeah.
But the cost of converting the power plant.
And there's also the cost of converting, it's the cost. In the eastern U.S., it's not so straightforward. That's why I say it depends on where you are geographically. Here in the west, we enjoy lots of sedimentary basins. Out in the east, you have to find those areas. And also in Arizona, it's very tough to find a place to inject CO2 in Arizona. You can find them, but more than likely you'd have to pipe CO2 from the power plant to the site to inject it.
Okay, thank you. Next question here.
Yeah, I wanna make a comment on this fourth generation nuclear reactor actually. At the present time, there is none that actually is ready to work. It's still on the design table, and so that will take also quite some time.